Good evening, folks. What if the king of the gods, Zeus himself, had a secret he'd never want revealed? Tonight we'll explore how a ruler of Olympus could weave order and chaos into the same lightning strike, and why his biggest flaws might also have been his greatest strength. As you drift off, let soft crackling fire sounds guide you through the paradox of ultimate power in a time of myths. Please, make yourself comfortable in bed. Turn the lights off. Wrap yourself in your softest duvet, and let your body sink into stillness. Now, close your eyes and get ready to wake up in Olympus. And if you enjoy where I'm taking you, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. It truly helps me continue crafting these journeys. For you. Hera, queen of the gods, begins her story in turmoil. As the goddess of marriage, she held a role woven tightly with ideals of unity, loyalty, and balance. But her own union with Zeus, a marriage that was meant to inspire mortals and gods alike, became a churning storm of betrayal and heartbreak. Zeus, a ruler as impulsive as the lightning he wielded, brought chaos not only to Olympus, but directly into their home. Imagine the weight of Hera's paradox, gilded as a symbol of commitment, yet tethered to a partner who symbolized the very rupture of vows. Hers was a marriage where humiliation was braided into every promise.
In the face of Zeus's many betrayals, Hera turned to vengeance, not as petulance, but as purpose. She became well known not only for her sharp tongue, but for her power, working through calculated acts of justice or cruelty, depending on whom you ask. One of Hera's most infamous acts was her punishment of Io, a mortal woman who caught Zeus's fleeting, deceptive eye. To protect Io from Hera's wrath, Zeus transformed her into a cow, attempting to conceal his indiscretion. Hera, however, was not so easily deceived. She sent Argus, a giant with 100 eyes, to keep watch over Io. When Argus was eventually slain at Hermes' hand, Hera took his sightless eyes and placed them on the tail of the peacock, a symbol that would forever remind the world of her vigilance and fury. Picture it, the weight of a goddess's anger marked with such permanence, her pain rippling through both myth and nature. Hera's battles were not only with Zeus's lovers, but also their offspring. Among these was Hercules, a child born of Zeus's unfaithfulness and Hera's most persistent reminder of that betrayal. As a baby, Hercules faced Hera's wrath when she sent 2 serpents to his cradle, a test of his strength. Though Hera failed to destroy him, her actions set the tone for his life. She would be a constant antagonist, her rage coloring his journey from the cradle to the pyre. While we might recoil at Hera's vengeance, consider this. Her fury gave structure to the sprawling chaos of Olympus. Hera's punishments, however severe, served as a reminder to every being of the consequences of breaking sacred bonds. Without this specter, would the lofty ideals of union and fidelity have meant anything at all? Still, her relentless defense of these ideals was not without cost. Beneath her regal bearing, Hera carried the emotional weight of endless betrayals. Imagine being a goddess so deeply tied to permanence, to the sacredness of lasting bonds, yet tethered to a husband who delighted in breaking them. Few could endure the duties she upheld, standing as the protector of marriage while enduring its constant desecration in her own life. In her we see an eternal struggle, one that resonates across time. How many husbands and wives through history might whisper to the wind, "I am Hera," and feel that pang of recognition? Hera's tale is not merely one of scorned love and vengeance, but one of resilience and an unflinching claim to her identity. Mortals flocked to her temples, offering prayers for blessings on their unions, their childbirths, their hopes for permanence in an impermanent world. In places like Argos and Samos, her worshippers clung to her as a symbol of stability, a contradiction to her personal reality. They called her the upholder of marital harmony, yet her power radiated from the frustration and strife she endured within her own marriage. Perhaps it was the paradox itself that gave her divinity, a goddess brought to life in the space where devotion and despair intertwine. Even in moments of what might be described as cruelty, Hera reinforced Olympus itself. Without her fury,
Zeus would have run unchecked, his whims no more than an endless storm that flattened all beneath it. Hera's spite became a kind of anchor. It was through her rage that the divine system found a limit, one that Zeus himself could not defy. When she punished his mortal lovers or plotted against his children, she enforced a semblance of accountability in a world of slippery immortality. Her actions were not arbitrary. Like the patterned beads on the peacock's tail, her power was deliberate, her choices loud reminders of her position, her fury carved deeper than her role as Zeus's wife. Beyond her indignation stood a goddess whose wrath upheld the structure of Olympus. Her punishments ensured Zeus could never become all-powerful, that his indiscretions, though frequent, would have consequences he could not completely avoid. Her rage was Olympian not because it burned indiscriminately, but because it was wielded with purpose. Can chaos ever truly hold things together? Perhaps in Hera's case it did. She harnessed Zeus's disorder and shaped it into the stability of Olympus, whether through fire, cruelty, or even soft, begrudging tolerance. And yet, as she wielded her fury like a weapon to protect Olympus, shield marriage, and stake her claim to her divine right, a question rises to meet us. What beyond rage can be found in Hera's heart? Does pain remain pain if it gives birth to something lasting? As you let that thought settle, consider the quiet strength it must take to both love and rule amongst gods, where even the thunder is quick to betray. But beyond Hera lies another who embodied chaos and desire, not through loyalty and vengeance, but through beauty and passion. The goddess Aphrodite approaches, her story showing a sparkling side of Olympus's disorder. Where Hera used fury to anchor Zeus, Aphrodite unleashed storms of a different kind. What happens when desire itself becomes the source of upheaval? Let's find out. Aphrodite's story begins in a moment of vivid contrast. She is beauty born from violence, a goddess who rose from the sea foam created when Cronus cast the severed remains of Uranus into the oceans. It's an origin that seems almost at odds with her purpose, isn't it? She steps into the world as the goddess of love, beauty, and desire, even romance itself, but her roots come from discord and chaos. In some versions of the myth, she is simply the daughter of Zeus and Dione, one of his lesser-known consorts. Yet, this other origin, rising from the waters, is older and feels strangely fitting. Desire often begins this way, doesn't it? Unexpected. Not gentle, but powerful. When she emerged from the waves, her beauty was said to overwhelm the world itself. Nature awakened at her presence. Flowers sprung from rocky ground, and mortals and gods alike felt compelled to her. Yet her power was not only in her appearance. She possessed something more, something that gave her full command over the hearts of gods and mortals. An enchanted belt, the cestus, gave her the ability to inspire love and longing in anyone she chose. This small, magical object was not simply a tool. It showed that love, though radiant, could also manipulate and disrupt. Aphrodite was immediately welcomed as a force of pleasure and connection. But with that came the unpredictability of her role. Unlike Hera, who upheld vows and stability, Aphrodite cared little for boundaries or promises. She wasn't designed for consistency. She didn't rule over the strength of devotion, but rather the intoxication of infatuation. And while this brought joy and beauty, it also sowed discord in its wake. Take a moment to imagine her not as a goddess floating in some idealized state of romance, but as a figure who embodied the tension between fleeting passions and their consequences. That tension defined much of her story. Among the Olympians, this dynamic became painfully apparent through her marriage to Hephaestus, the god of fire, blacksmithing, and craftsmanship. He was a being of skill and quiet devotion, thoughtful and steady. Even his hands shaped the world's beauty through his work. Yet Aphrodite, the goddess who represented the irresistible allure of passion, found no satisfaction in this union. She gravitated instead to Ares, the god of war, a figure wholly opposite to Hephaestus. Where Hephaestus was precise, Ares was raw, impulsive, and unrestrained in his desires. Their affair, like so much of what Aphrodite touched, led to embarrassment and chaos. When Hephaestus discovered their betrayal, he used his ingenuity to construct an unbreakable golden net, finely woven, yet impossible to escape. As Aphrodite and Ares lay together, the net fell over them, leaving them trapped and vulnerable. The scene that followed wasn't quiet. The other gods were called as witnesses, gathering to laugh at their humiliation. Can you imagine it, writhing under the weight of divine judgment, mortified beneath that glimmering web of proof? For Aphrodite, a goddess who thrived on adoration, such exposure must have been unbearable, even if only brief. Yet she endured it. Like the sea she had been born from, she swallowed the shame, her waters churning below a deceptively calm surface. Yet it wasn't only among the gods that Aphrodite's power to inspire longing caused chaos. Mortals, too, were caught in her web. Perhaps the most notable example, certainly the most catastrophic, was her infamous role in the Trojan War. It began with a beauty contest among goddesses. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite approached Paris, a mortal prince, and placed upon him an impossible decision, to choose the most beautiful among them. Each goddess offered a bribe, something to tip the scale in her favor, and Aphrodite's offer was irresistible. She promised Paris the love of Helen, a woman renowned as the most beautiful among mortals. There was just one problem. Helen was already married. Her abduction by Paris, spurred by Aphrodite's promise, ignited a war that would burn for a decade and cost countless lives. Think about this for a moment. Aphrodite, in her pursuit of being chosen, sparked a conflict that stretched beyond anything Paris or Helen could have imagined. Her power to inspire desire wasn't contained to intimate moments. It rippled outward, shaking foundations of kingdoms and dragging entire civilizations into ruin. Beauty, in its purest form, may inspire awe, but as Aphrodite showed, beauty paired with unchecked desire can break even the strongest of bonds. This duality defines Aphrodite. On one hand, she is the goddess whose influence brought joy and passion. She helped lovers find their way to one another, presided over weddings, and graced the world with a sense of connection. Her softer side was as enchanting as her darker moments were destructive. You might find her blessing the union of two hearts, her presence a silent promise of harmony in their shared devotion. She represented the yearning for companionship that every mortal feels, the pull towards love, even with its risks. In her temples, worshippers prayed for her favor, asking for her gifts in their relationships and their lives. And yet she remained untouched by the stability she created for others. Where Hera upheld loyalty, Aphrodite thrived on freedom, sometimes to the detriment of those caught in her sphere. Reflect for a moment on how this mirrors human reality. When we follow unchecked longing or chase fleeting desires, we may find ourselves in moments of pure beauty, but we may also find heartbreak. Aphrodite embodies this perfectly. She is intoxicating and radiant, but her beauty is never without its price. Her complexity becomes even more apparent when we think of her as a patron not of permanence but of intensity. She doesn't promise eternity, she promises the spark. And sparks, as we know, ignite but rarely endure. While she could bless lovers with union and inspire joy, she could also tear people apart. Her influence didn't always lead to peace. Instead, it often created moments of incredible upheaval, much like the unsteady waters from which she first emerged. Her affair with Ares, her role in the Trojan War, and her enchantments all point to one truth. Love and beauty are not inherently stable forces. They create but also destroy. They uplift but also consume. Her stories capture the very human struggle of navigating desire, the complicated path of following our hearts while understanding the inevitable cost. Aphrodite's actions, from deceits to blessings, reveal the delicate line between passion
and responsibility. Desire, when left unexamined, can lead us into chaos, situations we never intended to create, harming others without forethought. Yet when tempered with care, desire creates connection and transformation. Her life as a goddess offers no simple answers, but perhaps that's the point. Love, in all its forms, demands wisdom as much as it does courage. As we let Aphrodite's story settle, we can see her not just as a goddess, but as a lesson, a reminder of the choices we make when we follow our emotions. Is beauty a blessing or a curse? Is love worth the pain it sometimes brings? There may be no single answer, but in her, we find something to reflect upon. If Aphrodite's tale is one of desire entwined with destruction, then what would happen if love's chaos became wholly untethered? What if there was a god who abandoned caution altogether, one who thrived in the realm of pure aggression? Ares, god of war, waits just beyond the horizon of this story, a figure whose chaos was not hidden in longing, but unleashed through rage. Let's see what lessons he holds. Ares, the god of war, was unlike any other Olympian. He wasn't noble or restrained, nor was he loved by those who shared his divine home. He existed as everything raw and unfiltered about conflict, chaos, panic, and destruction. While warriors prayed in his name, offering him sacrifices before battle, they didn't do this out of affection or admiration. They did so out of fear. Fear of what Ares might unleash if left unchecked. Imagine him at the heart of a battleground, not as a tactician or a source of inspiration, but as the living embodiment of carnage. Where Ares strode, war followed, not strategy, not cleverness, but the blind, messy ferocity of it all. It was the part of battle where the lines blurred, where smoke filled the air, and no one could tell who was winning or whether victory even mattered anymore. His very presence brought with it his two companions, Phobos, the personification of panic, and Deimos, the spirit of terror. These were not mere embellishments of his character, but integral parts of his power. Panic and terror became his shadow, spreading outward wherever he stood. Even among the gods, Ares carried this sense of chaos. He quarreled with those far more revered than he would ever be. Zeus, his father, famously held little fondness for him, once lamenting that Ares was the most hateful of all the gods. That disdain wasn't hidden behind Zeus's usual airs of authority, but was spoken openly, a rare glimpse into an Olympian's honest perspective. Perhaps it's no surprise. Ares showed little in the way of restraint or wisdom. He lacked the calculated precision of gods like Athena, the very goddess who presided over strategy and war, making every action of hers thoughtful and deliberate. Ares, by contrast, charged forward impulsively, raw aggression his only tool. While Athena moved like a chess master, predicting outcomes before they unfolded, Ares seemed to swing wildly, both literally and figuratively, leaving behind fiery destruction even when the flames didn't serve a purpose. Take, for instance, his infamous affair with Aphrodite. It wasn't one fueled by subtlety or discretion, but one of indulgence and reckless disregard for consequences. Aphrodite, already married to Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship, was no stranger to passion or the dangers it could bring. Yet her union with Ares was explosive in its brazenness. When Hephaestus discovered their betrayal, he didn't simply lash out in rage. Instead, in what can only be described as tragic irony, Hephaestus used his unmatched skill to craft a net of golden threads, trapping Aphrodite and Ares mid-act. The unbreakable web immobilized them, exposed them, and, above all else, humiliated them. Hephaestus summoned the other gods to witness the spectacle, and they came, not to intervene, but to laugh. For Ares, who thrived on power and fear, there could be no deeper wound than this moment of public embarrassment. But even this moment, for all its sordid details, wasn't enough to humble Ares.
He carried his humiliation, not as a lesson, but as another mark of the disdain others held for him. It might be tempting to feel some pity for him, but even pity resists when you remember the devastation he brought without a second thought. Unlike other gods, who often caused harm with purpose or as part of intricate plans, Ares' destruction erupted from his own unyielding temper. His nature made it impossible for him to coexist peacefully, even among those whose wrath rivaled his own. On the battlefield, Ares fought hard and fast, but even there, his reputation carried little honor. He would storm into battle, striking down warriors with feral strength, bringing chaos to all sides, friend and foe alike. His presence transformed an organized effort into a frenzy. Yet notice how, even in ancient Greek storytelling, Ares holds an odd space. When the Greeks told tales of war, it was Athena they revered in victory. Athena they prayed to for protection or guidance. Ares became a figure to fear, not worship or respect. He wasn't a leader, but a force, a dangerous, disorganized flood of violence that even the Greeks themselves seemed to view with hesitation. One of the most striking elements of Ares' story is how deeply unloved he is, even by his family. For all his strength, he could never command the respect he so desperately seemed to crave. Zeus didn't hide his scorn. Athena treated his presence as no more than a foil for her calculated brilliance. Hephaestus humiliated him. And his mother, Hera, the goddess known for her fierce loyalty to her children even amidst her own storms, offered no warmth to Ares. For a god of war, he suffered perhaps the most painful wound of all: rejection.
Yet it's in this rejection that Ares becomes something more than simply a brute. He becomes almost a cautionary tale. His life is a vivid reminder of what happens when impulse displaces thought, when ego overtakes connection. There's power in rampant aggression, but not longevity. Ares wielded terror effortlessly. He brought power, but he built nothing lasting. His chaos destroyed, but it never created. There's one more element to his character that draws attention. For all the disdain directed toward Ares, he remains essential. Where Athena represented war's calculated side, the intellect that determined when and how to fight, Ares embodied the raw, ugly reality of conflict, the side that no one wanted to look at too closely, but that always lingered just beneath the surface. His sons, Phobos and Deimos, were proof of this. Panic and terror aren't celebratory forces. They're not prayed to in temples, but they're undeniably part of battle and a reflection of the psychological scars war leaves behind. Perhaps the most human aspect of Ares is his struggle to be seen beyond what he represents. Maybe he's not entirely villainous, though it's easy to label him as such. He's like the harsh winds of a storm, powerful, inevitable, but uncontrollable. Even Zeus, with his unmatched might, couldn't reshape Ares into anything gentler or more respected. The god of war remained what he was and always would be, the pure, untamed spirit of battle. His unrelenting nature may have estranged him from his divine family, but at least in that way he stayed true. As you sit with Ares' story, it's worth thinking about what role he plays in the broader tableau of Olympus. He reveals the dangers not just of war, but of unchecked emotion. His impulsiveness carried consequences: humiliation for himself, devastation for others. His lack of connection estranged him from the very gods he fought alongside, isolating him even in the mighty halls of Olympus. And yet, without Ares, war itself might lack its terrifying reality. It's easy to imagine battles won through cleverness, through Athena's strategy or Zeus's lightning strikes. But then comes Ares, slamming through all that clarity, reminding everyone that combat at its core is raw and reckless. So, what can we learn from Ares? Perhaps it's that strength, when untethered from clarity and balance,
becomes destructive, even for those who wield it. Without restraint, power consumes. Without purpose, power isolates. In many ways, Ares teaches us the value of restraint even as he fails, over and over again, to embody it. As we leave him behind, take a moment to think about the kind of power that doesn't roar but observes. There's another side to war, one that Ares could never comprehend but was perfectly embodied by Athena. Where Ares struck first and thought only in the aftermath, Athena worked with precision, strategy, and balance. While Ares filled the battlefield with noise and blood, she moved quietly, shaping outcomes through intellect rather than sheer force. She stands as his perfect counterpoint and a reminder that power tempered by wisdom often lasts longer than power driven by impulse. Let's turn to her now and explore what her story reveals. Athena's story begins not with struggle or tragedy, but in an act as striking as her character. She was born fully formed and armored, springing straight from the head of Zeus. From the moment of her arrival, there was no uncertainty about who she was or what she represented. She entered the world a clear symbol of wisdom, ready for battle, not in the way her brother Ares was, but with precision and thoughtfulness. Athena wasn't born for chaos. She was born for control. Where Ares stormed clumsily onto the battlefield, leaving destruction in his wake, Athena watched, assessed, and planned, moving each piece on the chessboard with care. Imagine her standing tall in her gleaming armor, the owl, her sacred symbol, perched near her, its watchful eyes reflecting her own focus. From her earliest myths, Athena represented a kind of strength the other Olympians often lacked. She didn't need drama or indulgence to assert her power. Unlike the turbulent stories wrapped around many of her fellow gods, hers unfolded with calm and clarity, unshaken by the emotional storms that plagued so many others. She wasn't here for noise. She was here for something far greater: understanding, foresight, and strategy. This, of course, set her in stark contrast to Ares, whose brutality seemed almost rudimentary in comparison. Ares fought with ferocity, but Athena saw war as more than swinging swords and clashing shields. To her, conflict was a complex puzzle, a series of decisions where victory came not to the strongest force, but to the sharpest mind. In many ways, she was the antidote to Ares' recklessness, the anchor balancing his wild energy. Where he saw an opportunity to attack, she saw multiple paths and chose the one that brought the best outcome with the least unnecessary loss. It's no wonder Zeus favored her over his war-loving son. Athena embodied wisdom, not chaos.
One of the most vivid examples of her intellect is her role in the Trojan War. Rather than rushing into battle, she worked behind the scenes, guiding mortals and nudging events toward her desired outcome. Odysseus, a hero known for his cunning, counted on her as a mentor and protector. It was Athena who whispered ideas into his ear, encouraging him to think beyond brawn and instead rely on his mind. She famously advised and inspired the creation of the Trojan horse, a stratagem so brilliantly deceptive that it brought down the powerful city of Troy from within. It wasn't just a victory, it was a masterpiece of strategy, a kind of poetic justice for the chaos of war. Athena's involvement extended beyond fleeting moments of cleverness. Her influence on Odysseus didn't end with the war. She guided him through his long, arduous journey home, a voyage filled with trials that required intelligence and forethought rather than brute strength. In every challenge he faced, from outwitting the Cyclops Polyphemus to escaping the Siren's song, Athena's presence acted as a quiet but unwavering force. She didn't solve the problems for him, but she offered him the tools he needed to navigate them himself.
This is where Athena's role becomes more profound. She didn't just wield wisdom, she shared it. She helped mortals find their own strength and clarity rather than overpowering situations by divine might. But Athena's wisdom wasn't limited to the battlefield. She was also the goddess of crafts, each stitch of her influence imbued with purpose. Among those crafts, weaving held her focus, not just as a skill, but as a metaphor for the carefully woven fabric of life itself. The story of her contest with Arachne is one that lingers, not for its resolution, but for what it reflects about Athena's sense of balance and control. Arachne, a mortal weaver of remarkable talent, claimed her skills outmatched those of the goddess herself. Instead of lashing out immediately, Athena challenged her, giving her the chance to prove that claim. The two wove side by side, their craft a representation of their power. Arachne's creation may have been flawless, some say even better than Athena's, but it carried arrogance in its truth. Her tapestry mocked the gods, exposing their flaws and cruelty. It was brilliant, yes, but irreverent, untempered by respect or balance. While Athena admired Arachne's talent, she knew such defiance couldn't go unanswered, so she transformed Arachne into a spider, fated to weave for eternity. This wasn't just punishment, it was also a strange, ironic gift. Arachne was allowed to keep her weaving, even as her form changed. The message was clear. Skill alone isn't enough. True mastery lies in understanding when and how to use it.
Athena's story carried themes of restraint in nearly every aspect of her life. Unlike many of her fellow Olympians, she was never entangled in torrid love affairs or messy familial feuds. Athena's neutrality in love was part of what made her a figure of calm in an otherwise volatile pantheon. While other gods blurred lines between loyalty and indulgence, Athena kept her focus. She didn't seduce mortals, betray siblings, or transform into animals for whims of desire. Her energy was spent on the betterment of those she protected, her influence extending quietly yet profoundly into the lives of mortals and heroes alike. In her cities and temples, worshippers approached Athena not out of fear or desperation, but out of respect. They looked to her for wisdom, for protection, and sometimes simply for a sense of clarity. Athens, named in her honor, became a center of culture and intellect under her watch. The city was not only her namesake, but a reflection of what she stood for: advancement through thought, prosperity through planning, and strength tempered by reason. To her citizens, Athena wasn't just a goddess, she was an ideal. As you reflect on Athena's role, there's something reassuring in her neutrality, in the way she approached life with an unshakable sense of balance. She reminds us of the power of constant awareness, the strength in restraint. She didn't leap into action when chaos struck. She observed, circled the problem, and tackled it with precision. In this, she offers a counterpoint to the reckless passion of gods like Ares or the unbridled longing of Aphrodite. Where others burned brightly at the height of their emotions, Athena stood steady, her light consistent, unwavering. Her wisdom wasn't always gentle, though. For all the guidance she offered, there was also a sharpness to her lessons. Her transformation of Arachne and her cunning manipulation during the Trojan War show that Athena could be ruthless when she needed to be. But even her harshest actions carried purpose. She never lashed out unthinkingly, never let impulse get the better of her. Every choice was measured, every step calculated. Whether through her aid to Odysseus or her weaving contest with Arachne, Athena demonstrated again and again that foresight and strategy could accomplish more than brute force ever could. Athena's serenity becomes especially striking when viewed against the emotional upheavals of the other Olympians. While Hera raged against betrayal and Zeus wielded his power with unpredictability, Athena's calm gaze never wavered. She was proof that control could coexist with strength. She held power, but she didn't flaunt it. She created boundaries, but she didn't overstep them. In her, power wasn't an unrestrained flame, but a steady lamp guiding the way forward. Her stories teach us about the importance of careful thought in the midst of chaos. Even when presented with challenges, Athena found ways to achieve her goals with minimal collateral damage. Whether mentoring Odysseus, guiding Perseus, or punishing Arachne, she showed that strength doesn't always require force. Sometimes, strength comes from patience and the ability to think 3 steps ahead. In Athena, there's something we can each aspire to, a reminder to pause before taking action,
consider the bigger picture. In a world that often feels driven by impulse and urgency, her presence speaks to the value of reflection and restraint. What might happen if we didn't leap at every opportunity for conflict or indulgence, but instead took the time to weave our thoughts as carefully as she wove her tapestries? Still, Athena's calm neutrality doesn't make her cold. There's warmth in how she cared for humanity, in the way she offered wisdom without condescension. She didn't leave mortals to flounder in their ignorance, but stood alongside them, helping them navigate their struggles with clarity and precision. She balanced power with compassion, proving that wisdom wasn't just about intellect. It was about understanding when and how to use it. And so, Athena becomes more than just a figure of myth. She becomes a mirror, reflecting the best of what we might strive for within ourselves. What if our strength lay not in how loud we shouted or how quickly we acted, but in how carefully we chose our steps? What if, like Athena, we learned to see beyond the heat of the moment and toward a path that left the world a little better than when we found it? But as we leave Athena's measured gaze, a question lingers. The gods, for all their power, still struggled with desire, restraint, and transformation. What do their stories reveal about the depth of our own human experience? The answer lies in the tales yet to come. Zeus, the king of the gods, emerges as both a figure of incredible power and profound contradiction. Known as the ruler of Olympus and bearer of unstoppable lightning, his image commands respect and awe. Yet, beneath the surface of his authority lies a character that is deeply flawed, impulsive, and sometimes outright destructive. Holding the ultimate responsibility for cosmic order, Zeus acted as a protector and enforcer, ensuring that the heavens, earth, and even gods themselves adhered to some semblance of structure. But for all his ability to impose rules, he was often the first to break them.
From the very beginning, Zeus's path was one defined by rebellion and turbulence. He was born into a precarious family dynamic, the youngest son of the Titan Kronos and his wife, Rhea. Cronus, driven by paranoia and a desperate desire to cling to his power, had developed the habit of swallowing his children whole. He had been warned by a prophecy that one of his offspring would overthrow him. Unable to bear this bleak cycle, Rhea plotted to save her youngest son. In a moment of cunning, she swaddled a stone in cloth and offered it to Cronus in place of her baby. Zeus, hidden and raised in secret, avoided his father's hunger. This act of defiance set his story in motion and foreshadowed the contentious themes of power and betrayal that would echo throughout his reign. As Zeus reached adulthood, he faced the inevitability of fulfilling that prophecy. With wisdom and strategy on his side, he acted against Cronus, forcing him to disgorge his siblings who had been trapped in his stomach for years. Among them were Hera, Poseidon, and Hades, gods who would later play key roles in the new order of Olympus. The rebellion against Cronus erupted into the Great Titanomachy, a 10-year war between the Titans and the Olympians. Zeus emerged as the leader of the victorious Olympians, securing his place on the throne of Olympus. With this, he claimed dominion over the sky while Poseidon ruled the sea and Hades governed the underworld. This division of power set the stage for Zeus's reign, but it also introduced a new layer of vulnerability, a delicate balance of authority, always at risk of being upset. Though his victory secured his position as king of the gods, Zeus's leadership was anything but smooth. He tried to rule Olympus with a firm hand, yet his actions often invited conflict and chaos rather than harmony. Central to these disruptions were his personal impulses, most notably his insatiable desire for mortal women, nymphs, and even goddesses. These affairs became infamous for the scandal they brought to the divine court of Olympus.
Zeus transformed into animals, disguised himself as strangers, and used deception in countless ways to pursue his desires. While this behavior often elevated mortals by creating demigods who would star in their own legends, it just as often plunged them and the gods themselves into turmoil.
Hera, his queen and sister, bore the brunt of this chaos. Their marriage was turbulent at best, a relentless cycle of betrayal and retribution. While Zeus pursued one conquest after another, Hera lashed out. Not so much at him, but at his lovers and their children. Her punishments were cruel and unrelenting. The mortal Io, for instance, was transformed into a cow under Hera's wrath and condemned to wander until she found peace in distant lands. Hercules, one of Zeus's most famous illegitimate children, became the lifelong target of Hera's vengeance. Their tumultuous relationship painted a picture of Olympus as less of a divine utopia and more of a celestial soap opera, where power struggles and emotional betrayals roiled just beneath the shining surface. Even beyond the personal dramas brought on by his infidelities, Zeus struggled with consistency as a leader. As the king of Olympus, he was tasked with upholding laws and mediating disputes. Yet he was notorious for undermining his own decrees. He enforced oaths ruthlessly, but rarely adhered to them himself. In one moment, he would harshly punish mortals or fellow gods for acts of hubris or disobedience, and in the next, he would commit acts that tested the very limits of divine order. This duality made Zeus a ruler who was both feared and deeply unpredictable. He was seen as a protector, yes, but also as a destabilizing force, something that over time became a source of tension within Olympus itself. One of the clearest examples of this duality lies in Zeus's role as a cosmic referee. He presided over the disputes of gods and mortals, handing down judgment and seeking, at least in theory, to maintain balance in the universe. Yet, his decisions were often guided by personal whims rather than strict justice. When a mortal king named Sisyphus challenged Zeus and defied his authority, Zeus sentenced him to an eternity of futile labor, rolling a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down. Similarly, Zeus punished Prometheus, the titan who defied him, by giving fire to humanity. For his actions, Prometheus was chained to a rock and tormented daily as an eagle devoured his liver. In both cases, Zeus demonstrated his capacity for severe punishment, setting consequences for those who upset the balance of divine authority. But these moments of judgment often felt as much about Zeus asserting his dominance as they did about enforcing justice. He could, and often did, use his power to settle personal scores, leaving many questioning whether he ruled with fair reason or simply selfish impulse.
Zeus's contradictions extended into his very nature as a ruler. He was undeniably a god of immense strength, a divine figure whose mere presence commanded respect. His mastery over lightning and thunder symbolized his ability to control both the chaotic and the orderly. Yet this control didn't extend fully to his own actions. For all his might, Zeus often seemed ruled by his passions, quick to anger and even quicker to indulge his desires. His impulsive decisions sometimes led to profound disruptions, both for mortals and for the other gods. Take, for instance, the time Zeus granted mortal kings the ability to make and break oaths in his name. Oaths sworn upon Zeus's name were considered sacred, binding the speaker to their word. Yet Zeus himself frequently ignored this principle. He manipulated oaths to suit his purposes, or simply abandoned them entirely when it was convenient. While this inconsistency frustrated those around him, it also served to reinforce the complexity of his character. Zeus was not a god of unwavering discipline or perfect morality. He was, in many ways, a reflection of the human condition, powerful and flawed, protective and dangerous. Even among the gods, Zeus's behavior often caused shock and exasperation. His legendary affair with Leda, during which he took the form of a swan, or his pursuit of Europa as a bull, generated moments that tested the boundaries of decorum on Olympus. At times, these episodes brought Zeus into direct conflict with other gods, who found themselves caught between revering their ruler and grappling with the consequences of his unchecked actions. Sometimes Zeus's personal failings became public spectacles, leaving him not only overexposed, but in some cases ridiculed. For all his flaws, though, Zeus wasn't simply a god of chaos. His reign undoubtedly brought challenges, but it also established structure. After the Titanomachy, it was Zeus who led the effort to assign roles and responsibilities to each of the gods. By dividing dominions, sky, sea, underworld, he created a balance that allowed Olympus to function as a cohesive whole, even if imperfectly. His actions served as a reminder that leadership, at its best, isn't about being flawless, but about maintaining some semblance of control in an inherently unstable world. When necessary, he could put aside his personal demons to act decisively for the greater good. His efforts to mediate between gods, resolve disputes, and maintain the order of the cosmos reflected at least part of his role as a worthy leader.
It's not hard to see why Zeus is endured as such a compelling figure in mythology. He ruled with flaws as large as his strengths, embodying an inherent conflict that defined both his reign and his legacy. As a god, he was supreme, wielding unmatched thunder and enforcing laws on the most powerful beings in existence. But as a character, he was deeply human, a figure shaped by contradictions, destructive and creative, chaotic and orderly, protective and indulgent. Zeus's story is one of power tempered by imperfection, a reminder that even those at the top of the hierarchy wrestle with their own weaknesses. As you consider Zeus, you might wonder what lessons lie within his paradoxical nature. Was his leadership effective because he embraced both chaos and order? Did his flaws make him relatable to mortals? Or were they a source of unnecessary instability? Zeus ruled with a unique mix of might and inconsistency, setting him apart as not just a god, but as a character who continues to provoke thought. Through Zeus, we see a recurring theme in Greek mythology. Power, no matter how immense, comes with limitations. Even the king of the gods wasn't above the pulls of desire, the weight of misstep, or the burden of balancing duty with self-interest. In his contradictions, Zeus embodies much of what mythology teaches about the human experience, strength and vulnerability intertwined. Beyond Zeus, the struggles among the gods speak to something wider, and perhaps more profound about transformation, resilience, and the complexity of existence. From his battles with Cronus to his relationships with mortals, Zeus reminds us that chaos and order are parts of the same story, endlessly weaving together. And in the quiet after the storm, perhaps there's something we recognize in that eternal struggle. Let's explore how transformation shaped others, both mortal and divine, and what these enduring stories still have to teach us. Take a slow, easy breath and imagine yourself standing at the edge of an ancient forest. The air is cool and soft, carrying the hint of something familiar yet mysterious. You can almost hear the whisper of long-forgotten myths brushing against your ears, summoning stories of transformation, resilience, and paradoxes that unravel slowly, like a winding path beneath your feet. Tonight, we will look to two figures whose lives were entirely reshaped by circumstance, two women of myth whose transformations speak not only to their worlds but to ours as well, Medusa and Persephone, a monster and a queen of the dead. Yet, both represent something far deeper, the power of change and the strength that can grow out of even the most unexpected places. To understand Medusa, we must first look back to who she was before she became a figure of fear. Long before the snakes, before the gaze that turned men to stone, she was a mortal priestess. Serving in one of Athena's sacred temples, Medusa was known for her beauty and devotion. It is said she carried herself with grace, her hair shining brightly enough to draw the jealous envy of goddesses and mortals alike. But her life would take a sudden and unjust turn. In some accounts, Poseidon, the god of the sea,
saw her and became consumed by his desires. In an act of power and cruelty, he violated her within the very temple she had so faithfully served. Athena, instead of directing her anger at Poseidon, turned it on Medusa. As punishment for the desecration of the temple, she transformed Medusa into a gorgon, a creature with a crown of living snakes in place of hair, and eyes that could turn anyone who dared meet her gaze into stone. This transformation did more than alter Medusa's appearance. It rewrote her entire existence. Her beauty, once a source of admiration and awe, became a weapon that isolated her from the world. With a single glance, she could inspire terror and cause destruction. But this wasn't a power she sought or controlled. It was a curse, spun not from her choices but from her victimization. Isolated and exiled, she became an outcast, feared rather than protected. Her story, in this light, is a reflection of societal tendencies to punish those who suffer while shielding those who commit the harm. Medusa became a symbol not of her own wrongdoing, but of the violence she endured. Her punishment carried the weight of trauma disguised as divine justice. Over time, her story, like all myths, shifted and grew. In early accounts, Medusa was described with horror, a monster to be defeated. Yet in later interpretations, her image softened, evolving into something more empathetic and complex. She became not just a figure of fear, but one of resistance. She endured what others could not imagine, and in her survival lay a quiet form of defiance. In some retellings, Medusa is even viewed as a protector, her frightening visage a shield against harm. Her story mirrors the way societies revisit past narratives, finding new meaning and questioning the treatment of those wronged. She stands now as a figure of resiliency and survival, a testament to what it means to endure injustice and still have strength beneath it all. As you sit with Medusa's tale, let it linger for a moment. In her snakes, in her gaze, there is a metaphor waiting to take shape. Trauma changes us, sometimes in ways beyond our control, just as she was transformed by forces outside her will. But her transformation also reveals the ways we can protect ourselves when the world feels too cruel. Her image shifted from tragedy to strength, showing us that even the most painful stories can find redemption through the lens of time. For Persephone, this moment marked the end of her innocence. Plucked from the vibrant fields of her youth, she now faced the cold, shadowed expanses of the underworld. The world above mourned her loss, with her mother Demeter descending into a grief so profound that it withered the earth. Crops failed, famine spread, and the seasons seemed to stop altogether. Demeter's sorrow brought life itself to a standstill. Her bond with Persephone went beyond that of mother and daughter. It was the link between the earth and its ability to nurture. But deep in the underworld, Persephone faced not just separation but transformation. Through her time with Hades, Persephone grew from a maiden into a queen. No longer just the goddess of spring, she became the queen of the dead, learning to rule over the shadowy realm with dignity and poise. While her abduction began with loss and fear, her acceptance of her new role brought resilience. She didn't become consumed by the darkness of the underworld, instead she brought her own light into it. Her journey symbolizes not just change, but integration, embracing both parts of herself, the goddess of life and the queen of death. Her story found balance, and the compromise eventually struck between Demeter and Hades. Zeus decreed that Persephone would spend half the year with her mother among the living and half with her husband in the underworld. This arrangement gave rise to the cycles of the seasons. When Persephone returned to Demeter, the earth flourished with spring and summer, a celebration of life and renewal. When she descended again to Hades, autumn's chill and winter's stillness followed, reflecting the earth's grief in her absence. It's a story that speaks to the rhythm of life itself, the ebb and flow, the light and dark, the duality that ties us to both joy and sorrow. Persephone's ability to embrace her dual identity makes her story deeply resonant. She wasn't overcome by her circumstances, she grew through them. As a goddess bound by two worlds, she learned to find strength both in the brightness of spring and in the quiet shadows of the underworld. Her descent and rise mirror the cycles of growth and decay that define all of existence, reminding us that life's challenges are as much a part of our journey as its joys. Transformation for her wasn't just about loss, it was about gaining the ability to exist in both worlds with grace and power. Place Medusa and Persephone side by side, and their stories take on an even deeper meaning. Both were shaped by circumstances they did not ask for. Medusa was cursed, exiled, and labeled as monstrous. Persephone was taken, torn from her former life, and made to live in a place she didn't choose. And yet, both found strength within their transformations. Medusa became a symbol of resistance, her power serving as armor against a world that tried to define her. Persephone became a symbol of reconciliation, learning to embrace the duality of her existence and accepting that life's beauty is often intertwined with its challenges. What do these myths teach us? They remind us that transformation is rarely easy and often comes from unexpected places. Both Medusa and Persephone show that even in moments of pain, strength can emerge. Medusa's story tells us that survival itself is a form of defiance, that even when the world turns cruel, there is resilience in standing as a reminder of all that has been endured. Persephone's story shows us how growth can come through acceptance, how embracing both shadow and light can reveal an inner power we never knew we had. As you let your mind wander through these ancient stories, think of the moments in your own life when transformation reshaped you. Maybe they weren't times you sought or expected. Maybe they felt like curses at first. But like Medusa and Persephone, these myths assure us that change carries strength, even when it feels difficult to see. There's a quiet reminder in their stories that every ending is also a beginning, and every loss leaves room for something new to grow. And so, as we step back from the world of Gorgons and underworld queens, a gentle question lingers. How do these ancient stories, told in whispers across centuries, still reflect the struggles and triumphs of our modern lives? Perhaps the answer lies not in the myths themselves, but in how we carry them forward. As you rest now, reflect on the stories we've traveled through tonight. Even the gods, with all their power, face struggles that shape them. Hera's quiet resilience, Aphrodite's search for meaning within beauty, and Persephone's acceptance of change. These myths hold lessons, not in perfection, but in balance and transformation. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, let the weight of the day fade. Imagine yourself standing in their footsteps, navigating your own challenges with strength. Remember, even in chaos, there is purpose. In every struggle, there is a chance for growth. You are safe. You are at peace.